Hello everybody. Our lecture this evening is taken from the 1946 London Lectures. This week we're going to be looking at lecture 1 from the 1946 London Lectures, and this lecture is called Work and Play. And Montessori reminds us that this period from 3 to 6 is a great age. It's a great important age because it is here where children expand and perfect what they've previously acquired from the 0 to 3 age. So she said it generally hasn't been recognised or understood, how children behave in the environment and why this is so important. Psychologists then, in her time that she writes about, she said how, they decided that children learn through play. But there were no real explanations for this, just children learnt through play. And she wanted to challenge this. Just because people are important and they say they're important and their job title is important, they can't just put out a statement saying that something happens and this is how children learn without backing it up with evidence. And this is very much what she challenged. She put, it is funny to say that something as important as character is developed through play. It sounds so easy. When people see children playing with sand or a doll, they say, you must respect these things because they are the means by which children form their character. So Montessori said, well, what about children in poor countries then? What about children who cannot afford toys like the rich? Therefore, among poor people who live a more natural life, we can also observe real characteristics forming in the children in this period, yet they don't play. She sees these small children work. They copy the parents. They imitate what they do, don't they? And these children are happy in the adult's world and they have possibilities. If their mother is cooking, baking a cake, making something simple like bread, the children join in. They have their own little mix in a bowl, and this is how they learn. I very much remember when I was a child, Britain back in the 60s, many people were nowhere near as wealthy as they are now. People think they're poor. They haven't really got much of a clue about what poor is. The standard of living is so different. But I can remember with my mum, when my mum made bread or made pastry, I had a little bowl with my own little bit of flour and salt and water in it, and I mixed it and I mixed it and I played it and I cut it out. And I remember by the time my pieces went into the oven, they were grey because they'd been worked with so much. There's nothing more fresh bread about them. But it's how I learned, and I was happy playing with my bowl, with my little bit of flour and my salt and water, and mixing and kneading and strengthening my hands, learning to use both hands together, learning skills for life because I was there working beside my mum, cooking, and as far as I was concerned, I was making something valuable for the family to eat. So Montessori is right when she observes this, isn't she? The little children here are very happy. She's seen men in India pushing carts, and children are there helping them. So observing the play of rich children is very different to observing the work of the poor. Yet they're all activities that are guided by the hand. Children may be using their hands to play with their toys. They're using their hands to do the tasks where they're supporting or working alongside their parents. Move closer to the door. Okay, here we're back again. I'm just moving closer to the door, see if I have better connection. So Montessori reminds us then that all of this work happens, doesn't it, through the hand. So this is a really important lesson to us then, to really think about work and play, why we have the prepared environment. We are working to make all of the opportunities available to our children worthwhile, things they are going to work with their hands that are also going to develop their intelligence. Whether it's because they're exercising their hands to make them stronger, whether they're learning through what they're doing, learning about the different textures of things, the sizes of things, the amount of things, whether the actual task is a skill they're learning. It's really important, isn't it, for our prepared environment, for us to understand what we're doing that's going to help our child to develop, and not to give them lots of toys. And we can see this, can't we? People get obsessed with buying the latest plastic toy, the gadget, the thing that makes lots of noise. But actually, what is the value there for the child? And quite often, there's not a lot of value at all, sometimes no value. If you can learn how to press a button to make something happen, you don't need 20 different toys with press buttons on them to learn to press a button to make something happen, do we? We need to think really carefully about the resources we provide for the children in our prepared environment. So Montessori says here, Through this work as well, we notice, don't we, that children that have this energy for work, they completely ignore what's going on around them. The child has energy to work, and he doesn't just do something once. And she talks, for example, about polishing. So if a child is polishing this brass cup, they won't just polish it until it shines and think they're finished. They're so absorbed in the work that they'll polish it again and even polish it again until they're completely satisfied, they've fulfilled that inner need for work. So having something like a polishing activity is really, really important. So this is a really lovely little goblet. I got this off the yard sale. And then I also have this little glass jar with a lid, and I just put a small amount, you can see, of cleaning liquid on this sponge. Now the children I have, I trust them not to suck this sponge, okay? It's not going to be dangerous because they're not going to suck it. They're not children that put things in their mouth. But it's really important when we put these activities out that we do risk assess what we have out. We don't put out a whole tin of liquid polish in case a child does try to drink it and ingest some before we can get to them. Really important that we do risk assess. So I've made this as safe as I can by putting it in a screw top jar. So to start with, the child needs to have the skill of opening and closing, which a baby isn't going to have. I don't even know if I can do this one-handed. I might have to put you down for a minute. There we go. So we have to be able to open and close our lid to get out our sponge, which has a little, I can smell it though, it has a little amount of cleaning liquid in it. And then I can rub this onto my goblet, get it nice and creamy all over. And then I can take my soft cloth and I can polish it to a shine. So this is a really beautiful piece of work, but what does this piece of work do that perhaps your plastic toy doesn't? So to start with, I'm going to have to use both hands together, aren't I, to do this, because one hand's going to have to hold and one's going to polish. So I'm also going to be crossing the midline when I'm working. I'm going to need to watch this glass, so I'm concentrating to make sure I've done every tiny little piece. So by having these fine movements, I'm going to perfect those fine movements, aren't I? Because to start with, I might not be quite so precise in my movements, but I realise that I want to polish this beautiful little pattern. So I'm going to work more carefully and have little tiny rotations with my fingers. And now my fingers are strengthening and they're perhaps doing the same little patterns that might appear in some of my letters when I'm older and I want to write. So a really beautiful little work that is everything, isn't it? It is concentration, it's determination, it's perfecting my skill, it's developing my fine motor skill, it's developing using both hands together. Those skills we need when we read and when we write can all come from an early activity of polishing something like this little brass goblet. But what else am I going to have? When it's beautiful and shiny, I'm going to be so proud of this. So it's my work. I have ownership of the work. I've perfected it. I've polished it until I'm happy that I have finished. It's my work. I own it. And I completely own the pride in having done this. Now, should someone walk behind and say, my goodness, that brass goblet shines so beautifully, I might feel even a little bit prouder. Someone doesn't need to say to me what a good girl you are or how clever. I know I've been clever polishing this to the highest shine I've ever seen on it because I have really good visual discrimination. I know this is really shiny now. But just to reinforce what I've done sometimes is quite nice. So this is a beautiful piece of work that we'd walk past and never think to give a 3 or 4 year old a brass goblet to polish, but actually they'll probably have more fun and more feel-good factor from doing this than pressing the buttons on a plastic toy. And this will last much, much longer. And I'll probably return to do it again as well. So when I've finished with my work then, I'm going to pop it on my tray. I am going to pop my little sponge back into my pot. Screw the lid back on, all one-handed. There we go. I used my knees as well because I knew I could. And then I'm going to pop it on my little tray and I'm going to put it onto my shelf and slide it under here and put it back where I got it from. Because also in the classroom, I understand, don't I, respect for the environment. I haven't got a huge basket of toys where I tip them all out, don't know which one to play with because I'm so overwhelmed and they've all started beeping and making noises at me. I can't do that. And then I don't bother putting them away and I walk off because I'm so overwhelmed. This work, now I understand respect for the environment. I've used it, I've perfected my skill and I've put it back where it came from, just like we do in our classroom and really we want to in our homes as well, don't we? So Montessori said that she'd never seen this type of concentration before, not even when she'd been into schools. So this was quite an astonishing fact that children will then reveal themselves through their work. But our class doesn't always start like this at the beginning of the year, does it? And I have lots of messages from people who say, oh my goodness, the children I've got in the class now, I don't know what to do. They're breaking things, they're disruptive, nothing gets put away. We have to go right back to the beginning, don't we? Reinforcing our classroom rules, sometimes by making this a fun way, engaging the children, getting their trust, walking them around the classroom, being proud that, oh, you're strong enough to walk quietly, that's so wonderful. Engaging the children in work that might require huge heavy work and great big gross motor skills. It might be lugging buckets full of stones across the garden to help the children to ground themselves. Whatever work they need, that's what we're observing for now. This lovely work that's going to help our child to focus, to develop concentration. Because let's face it, if you have a classroom of children or 4 or 5 children who are feeling quite disruptive, that are too heavy-handed with things, if you take them out into the garden with 3 or 4 lovely big buckets and lots of stones, and this is heavy work, they're going to have to concentrate to fill those buckets. They're going to have to really use all of their strength and their teamwork to carry these buckets around the garden. It's going to use up their energy. It's going to exhaust them. And when they've finished, they're going to be proud that they've managed to move things up the garden or across the garden where they want to go. And this is going to start giving them those feel-good factors, this I've done the work, I've achieved it. Whoa, I'm tired from that work, but I know I've done something and I've fulfilled an inner need. So if you're at the point where you have children coming in, or you've just started your year and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do with these children, they're so disruptive, and you've started to get into the don't do this, stop it, don't do that. Stop, take a breath. You've observed a need in those children, probably a need from some big, heavy, strenuous work. Organise some, get outside and do some with them. When they've done this work and they're feeling calmer, that's the time to come back in. We've learned how to care things, how to handle things, that we can lift up big heavy things and challenge them to carry the pieces of the broad stair, which are really heavy. Can you carry these using your strength to bring them across the classroom and put them down without making any noise? I know how strong you are, I've seen you in the garden, but are you strong enough to do this? Then the children are challenged, aren't they? To, wow, you can do it quietly. You are so strong. When a child makes a noise with it, if it's on purpose, you can just ignore it. Or you can say, oh, are you strong enough to carry that quietly? Well, I am. Oh, I didn't see that. Shall we try again? And this is how we reinforce the actions we want from our children. And you're always going to have those children in the classroom who you find a challenge, and you'll find them a challenge until you observe them and meet their needs. They're the children I used to love having coming into my classroom, because I used to think, you know, I used to call it a little bit of spirit. They have a little bit of spirit about them. And, you know, they just need us to come up with these activities to help them focus. And this is their work. And through this work, these children will normalise, they'll settle, they'll learn some self-control, and they'll work beautifully in your classrooms. They won't ever get that normalisation through lightweight plastic toys that are bright coloured, whizzy-bangy, and just wind them up and just make them go absolutely crazy. They need work in the environment, whether that environment is the garden or the classroom. So Montessori says here that if we watch children, we'll see when the child has finished a big piece of work with exactness. They'll start to do it all over again. And this is what our children will do, whether they're carrying stones in the garden, using a cylinder block, completing their polishing of practical life, placing all the animals out on the large map, and then collecting them all up and doing it again because they want to, because they're so engaged in this work. So if we watch them, we'll see children then repeat work until they've reached perfection, until they're happy that they've fulfilled their inner need. It's not for us to say, you've done that, put it away. And Montessori reminds us as well that children quite often have no external purpose to their work, okay? They are busy doing something because of an inner need, and they'll keep repeating it. It's part of developing their personality. So, Montessori, at the end of this lecture in the 1946 London Lectures, she actually talks about the book The Secret of Childhood, and she's quoted in here some correspondence she received from teachers that she worked with. And I want to read this bit to you because I know that many of you will be feeling like this at the moment, or I've had letters from you telling me that you feel like this. So it says, I should say messages. Not many people write letters these days, do we? But we do text. So she's put, in my book, The Secret of Childhood, I quoted letters received from the first teachers I trained, teachers in New York, Sydney, Paris and Italy. The teachers didn't know about each other, but they wrote to her all to report the same thing. They described how terribly disordered their classes were at the beginning. So you see, you're not in unheard of territory, are you? These teachers had the same. Children very much are the same as they were 100 years ago, okay? How impossible it was to get anything done because the children broke everything. Does that sound familiar? And what chaos it was. Don't you sometimes feel exhausted at the end of a work cycle? All you feel like you've been doing is fighting fires. They said how after a time, though, the children became calm and began to work seriously. These children became masters of themselves. They seemed to be newborn personalities. They lost their defects and became happy and calm. They were completely transformed. No teacher could do this. This is the work of nature when children are given possibilities for work in the right environment. So this is what you're observing in your children. You need to create the right environment. And at this moment in time, a delicate little threading activity on a tray might not quite be the right task for this child. It might be for a different child. So you very much need to observe, listen, feel with your whole body. What are these children's personalities telling you they need? If they're disruptive in your classrooms and they don't settle, what they need probably isn't quite there. So this is, like I say, I'm a huge fan of going outside and doing big physical work, taking them for a mile walk. You know, if you have land around your school, make it an adventure, a nature trail, not a walk for punishment or a walk to wear you out. Wow, we're going to go for a walk. I wonder what you can find. Who has eyes that are really good at looking for tiny little things, and challenge them to find things? And they can go out and find different leaves and twigs and bugs and berries and insects and come back and make it a really positive thing that you can then count the objects and sort the objects. Maybe you've collected big branches that they can pull along behind them to use up all their energy. Remember before I've spoken about dog-a-logs, and a dog-a-log is a log as heavy as that child can move with a rope tied round it so it looks like a dog's lead. You can have marker pens and draw spots on it so it looks like a Dalmatian, and they pull their dog along. They can draw a face on it if they want to, and it really will help them to ground them, to use up their energy, to give them focus and determination and a task. So when they've taken their dog-a-log all the way around that field, or they've walked for a kilometre, bringing their dog with them, they're really going to be satisfied that they've completed a big, heavy task that's fulfilled that inner need in them. And then there's more chance, like I say, that they'll come in and they'll settle and they'll refine their skills and they'll value the other things that you have out in the classroom for them. So that to me was a really important lecture of Montessori's about work and play. You know, when I observe the children at Happy Hearts Academy in Uganda, Ronald's children, they are always happy. There's 200 and plus children. They don't own a toy between them, but those children are busy. They come to school and they wash their clothes. The only 3 items they own. They come to school and they can clean their shoes. They can shower. They can go and they can plant things in the field. They have lessons too. Ronald does have lots of group resources and displays and things for the children and things that they can look at, and they do learn to read, but they don't have toys as we would imagine toys, or a class or a home full of toys. And those children are out in the yard and they collect the maize and they walk to the plantation with Ronald and they water things and they plant things, you know, and they do play and they run around the fields and they roll down the hill and they have a glorious time. And then they pick the crops and they have their big bags on their back and they carry them all the way back to school, and they take the maize and they spread it out on huge tarpaulins on the ground so that it dries. And if they're in class and they hear it start to rain, they all run out and they bundle up the maize and they roll it up in the cloth so that it doesn't get wet, because they understand if their food rots they'll go hungry. And you know, these children children are so happy, and they are working, and they are doing real work, because this work leads to them having a tummy that doesn't feel hungry. It leads to them having food. Carrying the water from the well leads to them having lovely clean water to drink. And they are, like I say, some of the happiest children I see, because they're in a real world. Everything they do is valued. Everything they do is real, and they really have that sense of value and pride in what they do. There's one young man, he's 10 years old, and he walks all the way to school at the weekend because he is in charge of working with Ronald to care for the pigs. And he even walks to school on his days off because he's so proud of his job being the pig man at school that he walks all the way there to make sure the piglets are fed. And he is just the happiest child. There's another little child I see, and he walks to the swamp to go and collect long grass for somebody's animals, and in exchange for doing that, him and his grandfather get a meal, and that's his work. And he's happy, and he's singing, and he's absolutely joyful when he's doing this work, because he has purpose and people value him for what he does. So there is real value in work, and just challenging our perceptions, isn't it, and our bias about children needing to have lots of toys to be happy. Do they really? Do they just need a small range of toys that help them develop their skills? Do they also need a range of work materials at home or at school, so they can develop real skills and make a contribution towards the community, whether it's their home or their school community? I think, you know, with Montessori, there's a lovely philosophy, isn't there, here, of valuing the child as a worker, and it's very much what we do in our classrooms. In a home, it's going to be slightly different. So in our classroom, we may well have our practical life set up on our shelves. Now, in home, you don't necessarily have to have a shelf unit for this, because if your child isn't able to pour their own drink, spread their own cracker, things like this, sweep up when they need to, those things will be in natural places in your home environment. So you don't need to have those on a shelf unit because your child has access to them. But you would perhaps on your shelves put things that they don't have access to. Maybe a new skill in the kitchen. Maybe they're not yet using a grater, but they'd love to practice it. Roman's been here again today grating. He absolutely loves grating. He went to the soap collection, collected his own soap, came back, he grated it, he caught a little piece on his knuckle, so he also learned how to deal with a little cut on his finger, and washed his hands and came back and carried on with grating again, because he just loved the work so much. So yeah, whether you're implementing Montessori in a classroom or Montessori at home, there's so much fantastic value there for the children to be valued for who they are, to develop personalities that want to work, want to be valued, want to have skills. And this is what we're looking for in our children, isn't it? Happy adults who take a responsible role in the community, that have care and understanding for everybody else as well. And that's what's going to bring us that education for peace. The more children we can spread it to, the better. See you all soon. Bye-bye.